Okay, for a few videos on how it works, the unitive state, that is, hopefully under 10 minutes. Not trying to do anything crazy here. One of the ways in which it works is that it has to totally burn out, cauterize, consume completely every last shred of the ego, and that could take 9 seconds or 9 minutes or 9 hours or 9 days or 9 weeks, or as in the case of Bernadette Roberts, 9 months. Okay, so where there had been pain, now there was peace. The pain of having an ego. And though initially dark and dry, it was deep and restful. After 9 months with no peace of soul, this gift was seen as a merciful lull, which I expected to dissipate any minute. But when it did not happen, I understood the pain had spent itself, done its work, and would not reappear. Though later in life certain trials would bring me again to the threshold of this particular pain, the peace at the center never gave way. It held firm as a gratuitous, defensive wall which nothing could penetrate. It was as if, upon touching this wall, all hurt, anxiety, and suffering would dissipate, become a joy, because it was a reminder of God's faithfulness and the enduring strength of our union. So remember, again, it's she switched to a we or an us consciousness. That's what she experiences at the depths of her being, is her and God. And so she was always being pulled into that center, forcefully at times, habitually. Sometimes curious how deep she can go. Anyway, she was reading Origin one day and read his idea of how he described God as a centrifuge. So she liked it and probably stole it from him, or maybe just took it from her direct experience before she even read him. In some ways, this process can be compared to the action of a centrifuge, wherein all parts assume their rightful place and are held there by the dynamic energy at the center. The result is the whole person, stabilized, balanced, working as a unit, with all parts going in the same direction. Thus, God holds everything together in unity, and, as His marvelous and original design, the soul must indeed be beautiful for Him to behold in this unitive state of consciousness where there's a union of wills. So everything becomes habitual in time. No experience in life has the depths of this center. It is a depth that belongs to God alone. And it is His domain that remains untouchable to all outside. At this level, only God can touch or affect us. When living at this level becomes a habit of soul, when nothing can draw us out, then there is no division remaining. All is conformed to the interior silence. The entire house is quiet, and the unifying process is over. We are now ready to move on. In other words, the unitive state is fully entered into. And there are some nice experiences, some infusions of love and joy that come along with that. But she realizes pretty early on that she, as a good daughter of St. John of the Cross, would rather do well to remain aloof of those. As stated earlier, the infusion of love and joy were lures drawing us into an underlying silence, but once we enter this silence, we must be weaned from these lures and become acclimated to a totally silent state, for God is deeper than his gifts, and what we want is the truth of God himself. So we must not cling to or become dependent upon even those experiences we valued before. Soon they will be seen as relatively superficial compared to the deeper dimension we are about to realize. The deeper dimension is the union without the sugar cubes. Another thing about how the unitive state works is that there's this interior flame of love that is also creative, that is not able to ever successfully and fully be expressed. But it is in the trying and failing to express this love that is the exercise of this union, that is the eventual burning out of all selfishness. The problem with the flame is what to do with it. If we sit still, it would consume us without dying. And if we move outward, we encounter the further problem of finding adequate expression for it. Thus comes the burning solution, either to die, to have eternal vision, or to move in order to return so great a love. It is to affirm and return God's love that the soul desires to endure every trial and suffering within human limits. At this time, for example, I envisioned for myself a walk through a snake and malaria-infested jungle without a movement of hesitation, fear, or a single thought for the self. I wanted to do this not for God especially, and certainly not for myself, but simply to exercise this union, to put it on the line, because it is in the exercise of this union that its true glory breaks through and his face appears. And the tougher the exercise, the clearer the vision. Now it's really, really interesting to me that she says his face appears there, because face is obviously kind of an anthropomorphic thing. And so she's obviously somehow, for some reason, talking about Jesus there. That Jesus appears in the toughest trials and tribulations. And then she makes this distinction between the historical Christ and the mystical Christ. Apart from its revelation, Christ's subjectivity is difficult to realize on an intellectual level. This is because Christ as the subjective self is not the historical Christ, but rather the formless, mystical, eternal Christ, the Christ of grace, transformation, and the Eucharist. As the human manifestation of God, Christ is more subjective to us than the Holy Spirit, which has no human manifestation, and therefore remains as the objective still point, or light at the center. Thus, despite their unity, Christ as the subjective vessel and the Spirit as its objective interior focal point are two different experiences of God. If on the basis of consciousness, Christ is too subjective to be known objectively, then on the basis of intellect, Christ is unbelievable as our personal subjective experience. Because our minds insist on retaining the image and idea of the historical Christ, we are kept from identifying him as our subjective, mystical, interior reality. More often than not, we only recognize Christ outside ourselves and interiorly do not know him at all. We often take him for the still point, the center of being, the Holy Spirit, which is all right since they are one, but it still falls short of God's purely human manifestation in ourselves. The failure to overcome this duality and realize this identity is a great stumbling block that keeps us from realizing in what way Christ is manifest in us here and now